know.
It's not
Saying
right.
that's why they did it.
I know, but that's not right. The 15 people control what, 400,000.
400,000 to vote on.
That's true.
I'll say you, meaning plural you. What I don't think you understand is that that's a certain amount of money to run this place. You're gonna have to raise that money.
Oh, you either raise it or you shut the door.
Well, they do. They're trying to shut the door.
And they can't.
They're saying, well, we're just gonna pay for that.
It's just like the freaking jail. Look at how many people moved into this country. They all haven't been good Christian people.
They can be all good people. It doesn't matter. The Christians have been good.
Yeah, they're just, I mean, that's the
And some of
problem.
them we brought up here.
Yeah.
A lot of them we brought up here. And,
It's gonna have to happen. I don't care what, I don't care.
homegrown terrorists we've had.
Yeah.
On the city and so forth.
So world's.
Just generating them every week.
So world's. Be ready.
It's unacceptable.
Yeah.
Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the Jail Law Enforcement Courts Committee, and we are now called to order. I'm going to lead us tonight in the prayer and the pledge. Please stand up. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your blessings. We thank you for loving us. And we just ask that you give us the wisdom, give us the guidance, give us the courage as we conduct business of the Washington County citizens. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, are there any changes to the agenda? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve.
Got a motion, a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. The next agenda item is the juvenile detention report. Is Director Collins here? Director Collins is not. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, if not, we can all read the report. We'll ask the questions next month. Item number 5, the enforcement activity report. Deputy Cantrell. And Mr. Cantrell, we didn't get it in the agenda, but we handed out the report you sent this afternoon, so you might cover that also, sir.
Okay, all right. Jay Cantrell with the Washington County Sheriff's Office. Our enforcement report, pretty self-explanatory. Not a lot happened out of the ordinary, except a Fayetteville police officer was murdered. I think the sheriff reported on that at your last meeting. Since that time, our deputies conducted an investigation and forwarded that information to Prosecutor Matt Durrett, and he has cleared those officers of that shooting. And so, Fayetteville PD is trying to find their new normal, and still, it's going to be a long process. But we'll never get it completely over, but that's the big thing on our enforcement side. Is we covered calls for Fayetteville from the night that happened, the night of the vigil, the night of the day of the viewing, the day of the funeral. We covered all their calls for them with our deputies who volunteered to come over and do that. So speaks volumes for our folks that were willing to step up to the plate and able to get over and get that done for them, so they could grieve together. Any questions about the enforcement report? We can move over to those ones that I emailed out if you'd like. I'm sorry I didn't bring copies. I don't know if Patty, yeah, I've got a copy here. You know, I sent you the daily count report, which was as of 11:41. It's just a breakdown of, at that moment in time, how many people we had in their classifications. So I think that was at 11:41. Randall tells me that we're up to 775 or 790 something. 791 now for a high count this evening. So I don't know what is causing them to come in this time of year. Unless school's starting back. I know we always have a surge in August, but it looks like we're going to have a January surge also. So you can see on there it lists how many we had of each particular classification of inmate or detainee on that second page of the daily count report. And then Chairman Johnson asked if we could come up with numbers of people who released OR and on the sheriff's order. Now, the sheriff's order are all misdemeanors because that's the only people the sheriff can legally release is misdemeanors due to overcrowding. The OR releases are felons, and those are in conjunction with the prosecutor's office and the circuit judge. So all the OR releases are felons. So there was 810 total for last year, and then the sheriff's order releases were 1,852 total. So those are people that were released without bond. They were released with no bond on their own recognizance to show up at their appropriate court time. And then the last one that we sent was he asked about, Chairman Johnson asked about Madison County board days, U.S. Marshal, state prisoners. So I tried to break that down, and then I realized after I'd sent this out that I'd made an error in the Act 309. That is a separate column, so that 1,271 board days for Act 309 is actually part of the state prisoners. The Act 309 is a separate column. So my mistake on that, but we have since worked with our IT guy, and he's developed a report that this information will be on monthly now. So you get this jail report that Major Dinger is going to go over. This information will now be contained within that report every month, so that you'll be able to see it and have a kind of a running total of what's going on. So, you know, with that, I'd sure entertain any questions about any of this stuff.
The only thing I'd like to see that's not there is a head count on the Madison County U.S. Marshal state prisoners.
Okay.
Also.
Over on the this daily count page, on the second page of it.
Okay.
It's they're in alphabetical order, so we go down to Madison County is just below the kind of the middle. So there's 32 males and 4 females for a total of 36. That was at 11:41. It's
Okay.
it looks like this page. Just a row of names, and then all the way to next to the last is the U.S. Marshals, and there are 78 total here for U.S. Marshal. And then the Arkansas Department of Corrections, you can see there are Act 309 inmates. There are 43 of those. The Act 570 commits are state inmates that we get paid for, and they are people that are doing we call it Act 570 sanction, where they've not completed their parole as required, and they can sanction them from 1 to 7 days. So those people are here on a week or less 570 commitment. The parole violated are people that have violated the parole and are actually going to go back to prison at some point as soon as the bed opens up. And then the parole violated is part of that reform that Governor Hutchison's task force kind of implemented, and they're here for 90 days. There are 45 of those. So all those are paid by ADC at a rate of $30 per detainee per day. And then you go on down for more ADC, the new commitments to ACC, which is Community Corrections, which is like our women's jail down here, that the state women's jail, or other ones around the state, the community corrections, short-term, 24 months or less prison sentence. There's 21 of those waiting to go, and then the commitment to ADC, which is the Department of Corrections, which is the longer-term sentences. There are 37 of those waiting to go to prison, which is a pretty low number. We've been pretty fortunate. That number's been up to a couple hundred in the past, waiting to go to prison. So they've.
Justice Deakins.
I have quite a few questions, and,
Sure.
and they might be more for you or Major Genzer.
Okay.
And if it's more of his territory, you just point
Okay.
me in that direction.
Okay.
Can we develop a cost per day of our inmates? I've never seen a reliable number of what it costs us per day to
Well,
house.
we send information to the Association of Counties every year, and then they compile that number that we came up with, the $63. I suppose we could.
Well, my
you-
deal with it is it depends on. It seems like we get a bunch of different numbers from different sources, so I would just want to work with you guys and get what we think is the most reliable number.
We can try to put something together. We'll have to get with Shannon and figure out some depreciation on the buildings and some different things like that that go along with that overall cost. Now, certainly we could divide what it takes to run that jail by the total number of board days and
Sure.
to come up with a number, but there's.
Well, I would just want a reliable number that we could start using.
Yeah, okay.
And even if it's for our internal use as a county, I'm sure we could come up with one that we think is our cost of inmate housing, right?
Yeah, we could try to come up with something that.
So, a year into this, I've been doing a lot of research, and I don't think we do any significant help to our jail population unless we can do something with our state commits and those federal inmates. Do we work? What I'm hearing is from around the state, it's possible that there are counties that might have capacity for state commits, and we could transfer our state commits to those other counties. Is that correct?
There are some counties that are open to taking them. I know Greene County took a bunch of Sebastian County's detainees some months back.
Do we ever do any of that? Do we ever vet out any of that process that we could get those moved?
We have not, but certainly that's always an option that's available to us. Just we have some budgetary concerns that if we lose that revenue, then we lose significant.
From a guy a CPA and a fiscal guy, that hurts me. But I think we're beyond the fiscal ramifications of some of this. If we know that we have inmates on the floor, and now what I understand is this is now a safety concern and basically a humanitarian concern, I think we have to take steps that are outside of the fiscal consequences of that, correct? And we'll have to share that burden with our municipalities and the people that contribute to this jail. So I'm open to vetting out and exploring any of those ideas.
Okay.
And, understanding their fiscal ramifications.
Yeah. We've talked about some of these same things internally.
Great.
But haven't come up with a hard, fast plan yet on how to pull it off and
Sure.
make it work, but certainly there's a lot of discussion about it.
And specifically with the federal inmate contract, I am really starting to question the benefit the county gets from that contract outside of the fiscal ramifications.
Okay.
And if I'm missing something there in that debate, I want to be informed about it. Does that make sense?
Right.
What are we getting out of that contract outside the fiscal ramifications?
Well, the people that are here on federal charges are people that are going to court at this local federal courthouse or at the Fort Smith courthouse. So they're local people, or at least have local charges. They may be. I know we have one guy here from Los Angeles, but his offense was committed here.
Sure.
So he's waiting to receive his whatever sentence or verdict in this federal courthouse. So they're local people and have committed crimes, and a lot of these crimes. Matt could probably speak to this better than I can, but a lot of these repeat offenders, the U.S. attorney will pick up those charges because they have a more serious sentencing guideline, and they have less parole. And so if somebody gets 10 years in the federal system, they get 30 days a good time a year, so they'll do almost the full 10 years.
Sure.
Or in the federal system, they'll do a couple years.
Well, the whole thing about any of this, I think, there's no easy answers to any
Oh,
of this.
absolutely, yes, yeah.
And I'm at the position to where I believe Washington County needs to prioritize Washington County, our citizens and our inmates, and our detention officers. That's my number one priority. And to me, some of these other things that we're doing are luxuries that we don't have. We don't have that option right now.
Okay.
And so that's why I want to vet all this out. We have to significantly reduce this prison population. So I really want to revisit that federal contract, which I know that's something that's entered into by the sheriff and the judge, but I want to understand that and understand the ramifications of that. And I also want to make a major push that if there are other counties that will take these state commits and are open to that possibility, I want to try to vet that out and get that done.
Okay.
I appreciate you very
Good.
much, sir.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman.
Justice Hires?
Thank you, Chair. This question is actually more for the public than it is for me, but I was wondering if you could explain, because I've had a lot of people asking questions about how closing the work release program is actually creating more bed space. I think I have a grip on that, but I think that the public needs to understand. Could you kind of walk us through that, please?
Yeah, I think the sheriff may talk about it more at length when he gets up, but I'll give you my brief rundown. We have people that were assigned to our work release program, and these are people that have a sentence to the county jail, and typically that sentence is too long to be able to go on our community service. Community service, they go out, they're the ones that, they live at home and they just come in and work a day or two a week, and they get 2 days credit for each day they come in and work. But if they've got 90 days or 180-day sentence, it's not realistic for them to come in and do, 50 Saturdays. It's just not feasible that they can commit, or they can commit to that kind of schedule to come in and do 50 Saturdays to fulfill their 100-day commitment. So we put them in our work release center and let them go out and work at different entities, the county shop, the Boston Mountain Recycling, different places, different cities would pick them up. And so they can work 6 days a week and get their 2-for-1 credit. So every week, they're cutting their time in half, or getting, for every 7 days they serve, they get 13 days of credit. So it knocks that 90 days down to a manageable level, and once their behavior is good, everything, then we can, when they get down to a reasonable level, then we can move them out to community service, where there's a realistic chance they'll be able to finish their sentence and, pay their pittance and move on with their life. That housing pod that housed the work release was underutilized. There's not a lot of people in it, and we realized on Friday that doing a quick count that we had 82 sex offenders that we had to do something with, and those that class of inmate typically has to be isolated just for their safety, because as I told Willie, some of these redneck Lincoln boys will extract some vigilante justice back in the jail, and we have a duty to protect when they're in our jail. So we have to kind of keep them separate just to keep them safe. And so with 82, we had many of them on the floor. So they're in 2 cell pods now. We had to find another cell pod. So we took the people out of this cell pod, moved them to where our work release people were. And so that freed up enough space to get some of those people out and off the floor. And so that's kind of, in a nutshell, how that worked. The work release program is really beneficial in the summer. A lot of cities come and check those people out to go help with their parks and recreation departments, and weed eat around their ball fields and different things like that. So until we can develop a place to house them, then we've had to kind of put that on suspension for a while. I hope that
Justice Harbison?
Answered.
My question's kind of along the line of J.P. Deakins, in that as our population goes down, our fixed costs go up. Is that a correct assumption to make?
I think so. If we get rid of the 38 Madison County detainees, our fixed costs are going to be pretty much the same. We know we'll save $3 a day on their meals because it costs us 98 cents a meal to feed them. So we know we'll save $3 a day. We did a quick calculation on our utilities at the jail, and if you divide the detainees by the utility bill, then it's about $2 a day per detainee for utilities, so save a couple of dollars there. You know, I suppose you'll save a little soap and a little toilet paper, but the people to run that jail are still gonna have to have the same amount of people to run it, and everybody knows that personnel is our big cost. That's the big fixed cost that we can't do much about. So,
Well, you know, I've just been a little disappointed. We've had some decrease. Well, it's not a decrease now. We've got over 400 in pretrial people. But, you know, when I first looked at this a couple of years ago, it was a pretrial numbers that really stood out. And, you know, all of those people could be, if they had the funds for a bail, they could be out. And I don't understand what's happening there. I mean, we had about 50 pretrial, we were down, but yet at the same time, our count was about the same. I mean, you know, it looked like if you had water running into a barrel, the same amount of water is running in as running out, and it was just stable. But yet the numbers were down. I just don't understand
that's a pretty
how
good
this can happen.
yeah, that's a pretty good analogy. Well, just, you know, a few here, a few there. We have 12, I think, 12 here that are on a body attachment, 13 that are on body attachments. That's a pretty high number for body attachments, but those are people that the judge says attach their body, take them to jail until they pay the amount of money that they're in arrears. Typically those are child support cases. It's typically what they are, the body attachments. So until they can come up with that money, and they can't come up with it when they're sitting in jail, obviously, but they have upset the justice system to the point that they've gotten themselves a body attachment. To me, it's not the first time they missed a child support payment that you get a body attachment. Typically, there are thousands of dollars in arrears, the ones I see.
Well, you know, our felony.
But that's just a small part of it, the body attachments,
well,
and then.
You know, if you look at these numbers, your pretrial people are still your big numbers.
Sure. Yeah.
And, you know, you say felonies. Well, a lot of people, if they have the money and they're a felon, they just bail out.
Correct.
But, you know, if you don't have the money, you don't bail out. That makes you a higher risk person. So therefore, you know, some other options are not available. Thank you.
Justice Madison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess mine is more of a combination of what JP Hires asked about and JP Deakins' comments. The announcement this morning, I think, was met with a lot of disappointment. It seemed very anti-rehabilitation. And I would say that I would have rather seen us reevaluate our Madison County and our federal contracts before we eliminated a program that was of such benefit to our detainees. And it came as such a surprise. But I agree with what JP Deakins said. I mean, 78 we're holding for the U.S. Marshal. I realize that they're local people, but if the feds have decided to charge them and pursue their cases, they're on the feds. The feds got a lot more money than we do to figure out where to put those people. And if that could mean putting those people back on work release, I would say fully to do that. And I just know a lot of people that I heard from were disappointed in that decision. So
Yes, ma'am.
I hope there's a way that we can reinstate that quickly.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks.
Justice Madison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to know why the daily rate for 309s is so much lower than the others. Are they sleeping on floors?
No, the state thinks that we're getting some benefit from them by them working. These are the people that, we have 24 women, 309s, and they do all our cooking and in the kitchen, run 2 shifts, 12 on each shift. And they do all the cooking. That's the reason we're able to serve meals for 98 cents a tray is because we have this labor pool and then only a few people that manage those female 309s. And then our guys are the ones that do all the mowing, do all the cleaning of the building. They
So
do
they
all the
all
mopping.
work.
Or they all work, yeah, every one of them. They all work. They all work. They don't just lay back there. They work 6 days a week on 12-hour shifts, and So they put their time in. But the state thinks that since the counties get some benefit from that, that they'll pay them a lesser rate.
Okay, so that $15 difference
Yeah.
counts for their labor.
Yeah, yeah.
I wonder if we should have a labor attorney look at that. On these corrections, Arkansas Department of Corrections, where the parole has been violated, are they paying the $30?
Yes, yes.
So they
Yeah,
pay
once
the
they're
state
violated.
rate?
Right.
Okay. And our pretrial detainees that everybody has pointed out are where our big numbers are. We get nothing for them, correct?
Correct, yeah.
And what is the factor that's keeping them at pretrial?
Just,
Is it waiting on court?
waiting on a court date or, yes, it's waiting on a court date. Once they get to court and then, get their sentence or get adjudicated, or whatever that is, either guilty or not guilty, then they become ADC or ACC or county commits or whatever, or they're released if they're, given time served or whatever.
Are they pretty much waiting on Washington County judges, or?
Yeah, all these people are, these pretrial, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Do we know where those bottlenecks are that are keeping them from going to trial?
Well, Stan, with his group, is trying to work on some of that, but, a little bit of it's at the crime lab, which we hope is, that backlog is starting to filter out because they've got a new office up here that are doing drug cases, and they've quit doing quantitative analysis and only do qualitative. So they quit doing how much you had. They're just saying, yes, it was a controlled substance. Yes or no, and if you need the quality, if you need to know how much they had, the quantitative, then they will do that. But so they're speeding their backlog up, so that will help some. We're hopeful that Matt's going to get 3 new people, and Denny's going to get a couple new ones, and that those folks can dedicate more time to the people in jail and actually spend more time. I think a lot of them that are down there are, especially the ones that have been here before. Know the system. They know that they can't start their good time till they get to prison. So I think, and for the most part, a lot of them are going to plead guilty if they're given a good enough deal. And so we just got to get the attorneys there to be able to do the wheeling and dealing.
Well, I was distressed to find out at a meeting not long ago that once convicted and sitting in county jail awaiting going to state, that doesn't count toward their sentence. So
Right, it counts toward the back end. Now, they get that time off the back end, but it doesn't count toward their good time. They've got to make they go down there as a class 1 4F, I think is what they do. And then, so they build their class up to finally they get to maybe a 2B or a 1B, and then they get like the 6-for-1 good time. Once they get that class built up, but they have to go to some different classes, drug and alcohol rehabilitation, get their GED, different things. Each one of these things they do, anger management, each one of these things helps them move up in their classification. And so once
but
they
they can't do that till they get to the
right,
state.
right, yeah.
So they're just in a holding
They're
pattern.
kind of stuck, yeah. And, whenever the numbers are really high, we have a lot of ADC people. What we find is that they start acting out because they know that if they act out enough, they break enough sprinkler heads or cause us enough trouble, we'll make a call to the warden and say, hey, this guy's, he's giving us all the business. Can you take him early? So some of them know how to play that game.
And that's
But
our
that's
benefit
typically
too.
that's typically when we have 150 or 200 in here waiting to go south, and they're just wanting to get on down. But these numbers are pretty low, and so and these people, we can actually put them out and help work in the facility and give them something to do. So they're actually busy.
Well, don't
They're
let
not-
the state know or they'll cut their daily rate. Thank you.
That's possible.
Other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Major Densler?
Good evening, Mr. Chair. I'm glad you guys all took it out on the chief instead of me. But he's exactly right.
Okay.
As you have the report in front of you, you can tell, just about the same as last year. The overall count, 12,946 was a total, and we've told everybody, we're full, don't bring us nobody. And we still ended up with that much, you know, compared to 18 to the 13,000. A couple of our biggest problems as far as females, you know, the schools and studies that we've been going to said females will be a third of your population. The building was designed and said 62 would probably be our max. And then, 4 or 5 years ago, we redone it so we could hold about 130 or 40. And now we're up to like 150, 160 females. So that's one reason the ones that took the tours have seen, you know, 30 and 40 sleeping on the floor. They were out of room. And then, you know, they're talking about the sex offenders. Used to, 25 or 30 was a magic number, just one or cell or two cells. Like the chief had said, we're up to 82 right now and gaining. So, you know, they're catching them. And like I say, there is no doubt if they get put in another cell, you know, all the detainees, they're all good with whatever except a sex offender, and they will kill them. There is no doubt. We almost had one almost beat to death a couple years ago that he'd had a prior charge. Anyway, they found out about it. He didn't come in on that charge, and like you say, he just barely made it. So it's critical that you have to keep them separated. I'm trying to think what else. You know, everything else is about the, you know, just about the same as last year. And like the chief said, we run a snapshot. He run on 11 o'clock, and I run one just before we come up here, and the high count's 791. Probably a good chance we'll break 800 and break a new record. You know, for no reason, just people coming to jail. 156 females that I was talking about that we're trying to move. So, you know, if they do end up being a third of our count, that's another issue, how you're going to house them and where you're going to put them. And one other thing, listen to with all your comments and your suggestions, what we should do is, you know, getting rid of the marshals. One thing, and I think I've said this once before a long time ago, they hadn't lately, but back we've had the marshal contract for a long time, and they used to bring us in. We've got semi-loads of blankets, rubber boots, razors, food, a lot of different stuff from time to time. They bought us some vehicles, vans when we was moving, and you know we do transport other prisoners, and they pay us per mile and per the hour. Same way when we watch their prisoners. So they do make a lot of revenue. But I totally understand what you're saying. But, you know, at the end of the year, if we're all this together, just a rough estimate, you know, if we're $3.2 million in the hole, just want everybody to understand that's what all that brings in. And if you get rid of these 70 U.S. Marshals and Madison County is, you know, we're turning loose, as you see in the numbers, we're turning loose 200, at least 200 now right off the bat. And that's not counting like the work release program. All them people met the guidelines to be turned loose. And, you know, the prosecutor office has worked with us. We've got a list of the people we can turn loose on the felons right off the bat. So if you move them all out, then we're going to fill that up with these people, these 200, and they're not going to be paying customers. Plus, like you say, we had 102 on the floor the other day. That's what, as the sheriff and the chief has spoke about, that's what kind of started this whole thing. You know, the reports down through the years, last year and a half, you know, we've been 40, 50, 60, 80, and we was 100, you know, 102, kind of what kicked this all off. I mean, there's just no room for nobody. So I just to make you aware of what, you know, what we know. Be glad to answer any questions.
Justice Harbison.
This is actually a question for you. Do we have any kind of report on our study of the criminal justice system? Have we let that contract?
I think it started.
It started.
We've had, yeah, we were scheduled to have some meetings.
Okay. So, you know, are we going to have an update monthly on some of this data, or we have to wait till the end when they're finished?
That's probably a county judge question.
Okay. Well, it's, you know, I'm hoping as we go along with this, if we see something that we can do, that we can go on and do it instead of wait to the end of the study and then, discuss what we're gonna do. I think we've got several things that we can do, but they kind of are small, but I think if we did all of them, then it might have an impact on our jail population. Your guess is as good as mine.
Yes, ma'am.
Other questions? Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Item number 6, the Ombudsman Report. Dr. Adelman.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Quorum Court Committee. My written report is brief this month, and my oral report will be brief as well, because we've been on pretty much hiatus for most of December. December is when our students who are basically doing the day in, day out work of the project are taking their final exams. Then comes Christmas and New Year holiday, semester break, and now we're about to start up next week, so we'll be jumping back in with both feet next week. I already mentioned to Jay and to Matt Durrett that they'll be hearing from us. Things have been a little quiet, but we're going to resume a full scale of interviews, recommendations, doing what we can on our own, and in conjunction with the bail project. So I don't want to rehash everything we said for the last 3 months, but some of the issues that have surfaced this evening as well still remain about what maybe policy changes we might able to make. I was at a meeting, and Mr. Chairman, you were there as well, in December, where we had some interaction with some of the circuit judges, and I don't want to kind of sugar it over. There are some philosophical issues there that remain to be worked out. We're trying to work them out on a continuing basis, because that's also part of our mission. What Justice Harbison was saying is absolutely true. As far as the barrel of water and between the bail project and ourselves, we try and scoop some out. The water keeps flowing in. So we do have recommendations to make. I want to add one thing to what J.P. Deakins said as well, very aptly saying that there's fiscal ramifications, there's humanitarian ramifications, and over a little bit of the hiatus time I had the last few weeks, I put my lawyer's hat back on and started reviewing some of the around the country, some of the jail and prison overcrowding cases. And I think one thing really comes through from these, which is that an overcrowded jail is a dangerous jail. It's a dangerous jail to staff. It's a dangerous jail to detainees, and it certainly impedes the mission of what the staff are trying to do. So we're keeping that in mind as well. And again, I'll be happy to take any questions, but starting next week, we'll be back. I will be combining my December figures and statistics into January at the end of this month, and then my next month report will cover both of those. Thank you. Any questions? Sir.
From the time you started till now, how many people have we helped out of jail?
I'd say that number is in the teens somewhat, and some of those might be reflected in the bail project's figures as well, since we do work on a cooperative basis. So I kind of cautioned at the very outset of the project with part-time staff. The Ombudsman project, I see, and I hope you see, great value in it. But as far as kind of being the magic, potion to reduce jail population by a large percentage, I think that's kind of beyond what we're able to do. We can do what we can do. We have, again, excellent rapport with the prosecutors and with the sheriff's staff and on the whole with the judges. So we are doing. Let me answer it one other way, at the risk of running over too much. The easy cases are the ones that we can get out of there. What I've called previously, the stuck cases. The people with FTAs who get held on the bail on a fairly minor charge goes up to $75,000, and the court appearance date gets set back to set back three or 4 months. The kind of unkind label I would attach to that is in some of the persons who fail to appear, even if they're not particularly dangerous, they get buried alive, and they're there for months. And one of our recommendations coming down the pike is going to be to prioritize not just pleas of guilty, but to prioritize the adjudication of jail cases. They should come first, and that's a managerial step that shouldn't cost a lot of money. So I'm taking up too much time as it is, but our numbers are what they are. We're doing what we feel we reasonably can.
Do you know of any that's come back since you've helped them get out already?
None through the Ombudsman Project, and since I'm in touch with the Bail Project people, they are, their numbers are very good, and their FTA numbers are excellent. Their FTA numbers, don't hold me to the figure, their FTA numbers, I think, are in the range of 10% or below. So the people that they arrange bail or bond for, the Bail Project has a set of volunteers who make sure that people make their court date, so there's follow-up. So between us two, and I mention us in the same breath, between us two, the failure rate or rearrest rate for new crimes has been pretty darn good.
Thank you, sir.
Other questions? Thank you, sir. We'll see you next month.
I'll have a fuller report next month. Thank you.
Item number 7 is the Washington County Criminal Justice Work Group Report. Sheriff Helder.
Somewhat of a limited report from me. I know that Monique was setting up some work groups, the split-offs. I think there were 3 different ones that she identified. Once again, I was asked what it was directionally, what my charge would be, and I talked to the group about really trying to address our immediate need with the overcrowding, come up with some creative ideas. They were supposed to meet again this week, this Friday, but we had 3 different conflicts, so I think the meeting's been postponed until next Friday. And that's all I recall from the meeting. If I could follow up on the bail project portion of the conversation just a moment ago. I know that Willie was asking Stan about it, and I think their failure to appear rate is fairly low, but the rearrest rate, we've got 40 sitting in jail now that have been bonded out by the bail project that are in jail now. So,
Sheriff, that's not exactly correct.
40 have been rearrested, I'm sorry.
Not all of them are in jail.
Was it about 155 or so that 40 rearrested?
153 were bailed out in 19. So there's the issue of failure to appear, which a couple of them have had failure to appears, and they've been rearrested a couple times. But I think what we're finding, and I'm very much in support of this part of the process, but I think what we're finding, and I don't know if Stan would agree or not, but we're already dealing with the low-hanging fruit. I mean, we're getting them out of jail. So the bail project is coming in, bailing out people that are habitual offenders. I've got just 4 of them here that have been rearrested, and I think the least amount of times one of them has been arrested is 3, 1 7, 1 5, you know. So it's going to be a difficult process on their end. I think they're doing yeoman's work of following up, getting volunteers to try and help get them to court and all that. But the bottom line is the majority of the people that they're dealing with are people that we deal with all the time, that it's really difficult to follow the rules, and they've been arrested several times, and 40 of them have come back to see us since they've been bailed out.
Justice Harbison.
Are they normally arrested for DWI and drug well,
whether they were arrested or not for that offense, it's an underlying cause in most of these cases. Would mostly be a drug offense, but I don't have that in front of me, Ann. On one of these that I do have, possession of a controlled substance is one. Second one's possession of controlled substance. Another one is theft of property.
Well,
And then one is
maybe we're
terroristic threatening and assault on a family member.
well, and that could be drug or alcohol related
I think
too.
there's no argument there that the majority of people that are in our facility have an underlying cause, no matter what their charge is. A lot of it has to do with substance abuse.
So, I think at some point, I think we're gonna have to look at substance abuse and try some programs or something. That costs money, I realize, and it's expensive for the individual.
Yeah.
And they have to be willing to do it.
I don't disagree. I am not dissing the program. I'm just making sure that you understand how the process works and how we're inundated, that we're dealing with the same people again and again and again, and 40 of them have reoffended. So just since being bailed out. So anyway.
Other questions? Willie? Justice Leming?
Thank you, sir.
You always.
Tim, how many folks do we have working in all of the sheriff's department, detentions and everything? How many people's down there?
Our total number of employees?
Yes,
330.
330. Is that that's everybody that has to do?
That's enforcement, that's clerical, that's dispatch, that's the jail, that's transport, that's courthouse security, that's everything that we do.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Sure. The majority are in the jail. I mean, affiliated in some fashion with the jail. Transport's part of the jail, community service part of the jail.
It's a big elephant. It takes a lot of people.
I have 3 constitutional responsibilities, as you know:
That's
enforcement, court services, and the jail. I spend 95% of my time on the jail.
So the overhead of the jail is going to be, if you had 2 people in the jail, it's going to be the same if you had 800 people in the jail.
Better.
Well, no, because, I mean, if you're...
I mean, the personnel, the amount of people that you own, that you have.
Well, that 2 people's an exaggeration. I know
Yeah,
what
I
you're
know.
saying. If we had a reduced number, would it still require the amount of personnel? The answer to that is yes,
Yes.
in a reasonable number that you're talking about. If you say 2, well, obviously we
Yeah, I
don't need,
understand. That was
we don't need 200 people to watch 2 people.
That's right.
But I get what you're saying, and the fact of the matter is that's accurate.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Other questions?
Thought Jay did a masterful job of explaining all of that. Man, what recall he's got.
Thank you.
Pretty impressive. Thank you all.
Item number 8, is there any update on their lease agreement, Justice Deakins?
No, Mr. Chairman, unfortunately not. I want everyone to know I'm trying to bulldog this down. We've got some preliminary information. I checked with the judge's office who's trying to get that information from the state before this meeting, and they promised to have it to us by the end of the day today. I had previously asked for a deadline of 12/31. We're at the sacrifice of the state, Mr. Chairman. We'll send that out as soon as I get it to the all JPs.
Justice Madison?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we continue to talk about that issue, I just wanted to raise the fact that there are a lot of people associated with that facility that are very concerned about our discussions. That's a very successful facility and program. It's been specifically redesigned to accommodate the kind of inmates it has as opposed to the kind of jail we operate. I've heard from employees there. I've heard from people who volunteer there. They're very worried about these discussions, about talking about just swooping up that building and just leaving the state. I realize that we're looking at it for money, but I think we need to be really upfront with the folks that are involved with that operation on what our intentions are, because they're concerned. And in addition, they have for years, I think since the animal shelter has been in operation, sent individuals from that facility to work at the animal shelter for free. And so if you talk about what we make off 309s compared to other folks, I think when we're talking about fiscal issues and when fiscal issues are important, when they're not, I think those discussions are worth having. But I also think we have to remember what's the greater good for this community, and the greater good is for that facility to remain operational. And so I just want to state that openly because I've heard from people that are concerned about that facility and leaving it in place and having it be successful. I don't fault the court for looking for maybe the state to buy it or pay more rent. But I think we need to be very aware of the alarm that these discussions are having and not be naive to that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Justice Deakins?
I feel compelled to respond. Two things. Until we get the information to digest this is all conjecture at this point. And I hear those same concerns. And I think that, you know, I make a promise to be as upfront about all this as we can. And that's the commitment I've made to go gather this information. And two, my priority is Washington County and the people of Washington County.
Justice Madison?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up on that, I believe it was our last meeting when J.P. Harbison thought the best solution would be for Community Corrections to buy the building. And I have since talked to Senator Leming and asked him to please convey that to Community Corrections and see if we could perhaps find a way to move in that direction, because it might be a benefit to them as well, because it is one of their successful programs in a part of the state that has a great need.
Thank you. Other comments?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, we're at the public comment period. We have a 12-minute period. We ask that you give us your name and address, and please hold your comments to 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Beth Coger, 3661 Embry Drive, Fayetteville, Arkansas. And I do have some comments, and I had them organized, but with what's been said tonight, I'm going to be kind of disorganized. But I'd like to start with when we were talking about the daily cost of the jail. The Association of Arkansas Counties in 2017, based on information from the Washington County Detention Center, figured state inmate cost per day at $91.14. And then later, they were able to verify out of the expenses that were submitted, and that did include depreciation that was mentioned. They verified cost per day in Washington County as $76.57. Okay, my next one. Oh, next I'd like to just mention about the 309s. There's been a lot said about the 309s tonight. That's a voluntary program also, and they do help in the jail. But one thing that we might think about is, do we really need as many 309s as we have out there? Could we have a few that maybe would train the inmates that are already in the Washington County jail so they could help and do jobs around the jail, and they just wouldn't be sitting in their cells all day? I think that's something we might look at. And okay, and also when we talk about the federal bed days, and I only have these figures through November of each year, but from November 1, starting on in January of 2015, we had 13,980 federal bed days. And from January through November of 19, we had 25,010 bed days. I did not have the latest figure when I had that. So we had 5,740 more federal board days in 2019 than 2018. And when we're talking about when something was mentioned about the bail project and how many they had that reoffended, I don't think we should just look at that. We have to look at the others too. What about the people who were bonded out by bail bond companies or on OR? How many of those reoffended? Let's see what else. Okay, there's one more thing. The agreement that we have with the federal government is dated December 1, 2015. It can be canceled on 30 days' notice without cause for any reason by either party. And $38 million, 4% financed for 30 years, would be principal and interest only would be for 1 year. $2,177,000. And 25,010 bed days at $62 per day is would generate $1,550, $620. Thank you.